Julian Stone had built an empire of glass and steel, but he lived in a prison of doubt. He feared that his family only loved the shadow of his wealth, so he decided to orchestrate a nightmare to find the truth. He hired a fake debt collector to threaten his own mother and brother, watching through hidden cameras as their world collapsed. But he never expected that the only person to stand her ground would be a woman who owed him nothing, yet offered him everything. Julian Stone had everything the world could measure: glass towers that cut the sky, a ledger that hummed with numbers, and a private jet that waited like a polished promise. At night, the city below him glittered with other people's small triumphs, and Julian lay awake on a mattress so vast it felt like a lake, counting the same question until it woke him up like a bell. Would anyone choose him if his name and his money disappeared? He had tried to answer that once and failed. His fiancée, Vanessa, had smiled across a table of crystal and oysters and told him with a bluntness that stung worse than any cruelty that she loved his life as much as he loved his name. When he found the messages, photos of her at gala events with other men, whispers of deals and introductions, she called it pragmatism. The engagement ended with a hollow feeling in his chest bigger than relief. Betrayal in a mansion echoes long. In the days that followed, boardroom affirmations did nothing to steady the ache. People crowded his life with flattery, but none of it answered the question, who would stay when everything was taken away? The plan grew from a wound. Julian told himself it was scientific, an experiment on human character. He would strip away the title and the money. He would create a crisis and see who came to his side. He would take away the scaffolding and watch who remained. Teresa, his assistant of 7 years, heard the plan in the penthouse kitchen. She made tea with the precision of a woman who had learned to endure much in the shadows. "This is not an experiment," she said, her voice dry as an unsent letter. "This is an orchestration of fear. You cannot control what fear does." "If it's done right," Julian answered, "it will show us who is sincere." "You'll be instrumenting terror against your own mother and brother," Teresa said, "people who have nothing to do with your trust issues." Julian ignored her warning. He went to Silas, the foreman who ran Stonefix, a small maintenance division Julian had long neglected. Size, hands the color of riverbank soil, and a moral language born of repair. "You're serious?" Silas asked. His silence sagged with the weight of what he saw. "Fear is not data, Julian. It leaves marks. You don't get to choose whose heart breaks for your curiosity." That last bit lodged under Julian's sternum, but he silenced it with a plan. He signed over authority to his board, announced a retreat to the press, and hid his watches.
He became Jules, a maintenance man at Stonefix. He wanted hands calloused and clean. When he stepped into the Stonefix garage, the light shifted to harsh fluorescence and the smell of oil. He learned how to carry a ladder without the fog of entitlement. Idris and Musa, 2 veteran workers, treated him as just another body, which was a hidden kindness. They taught him how to thread a pipe and how to hold a wrench against a stubborn bolt. Exhaustion became his only honest companion. The local clinic sat 3 blocks away, a shabby building with a corrugated tin roof. Clara was a nurse there. She worked double shifts and moved through the rooms with an economy of touch that made patients relax. The first time Jules saw her, a leak had opened in the ceiling. He climbed a ladder, dirty palms smelling of grease, and reached for a rusted pipe. Clara handed him a cup of tea. "Hold this," she said, with a calm authority. She had a wristwatch with a frayed strap and eyes that sieved pretense without being cruel. He liked her because she treated him as a participant in the world, not as a project. They shared sandwiches under a lean awning, and he learned how to call himself Jules without irony. As he grew comfortable as a worker, his other plan advanced. He hired an actor to play a collector, a professional who specialized in intensity. Julian kept the details tight, a list of contingencies to inoculate himself against the moral sickness of his own design. He told himself he would make restitution later. He didn't see the midnight hands or the old women who would think the world had come to take their homes. Then, one rainy evening, the first call was made. Julian watched from a distance via a surveillance feed. His mother, Eleanor, went pale as she listened to a voice claiming debts and consequences. A letter was slid under the gate. Julian saw his brother, Marcus, pacing in small, panicked movements. The gardener fell back as if hearing something sharp in the air. Julian's chest felt hollow. He had meant to measure hearts. He had not expected to break them. He saw Eleanor fold into herself like an old book. He saw a neighbor's child cling to her leg, an anchor that might break. Julian wanted to unmake the whole thing, but revelation felt cowardly before the test was complete. Suddenly, Clara appeared at the gate. She had heard the rhythm of panic in the neighborhood and had come without calculation. She walked to Eleanor and sat beside her. She took the child's hand. She put herself in the line of comfort, as if it were a trade worth making. Julian called Silas. "Stop it, now!" But the fear didn't evaporate just because he recalled the actor. The damage was done. The next morning, Julian went to the clinic. Clara greeted him with a face that didn't yet know the truth. "I put people through a scare," Julian confessed, his voice sounding distant. "I made a plan that used fear to test loyalty." Clara blinked.
"I don't think fear proves anything," she said finally. "Panic erases the details you wanted to measure. It makes friends forget why they stayed in the first place." Julian spent the following weeks in the anatomy of consequences. He drafted an apology he was too afraid to send. He walked through the properties he owned and saw the faces of the managers whose lives he had inconvenienced. He felt the true sorrow of a man who thought an answer could be purchased. He went to his mother's house. Eleanor stood on the porch, looking smaller in the light that once made her regal. "Everyone," Julian said to the gathered family and staff, "I asked people to do something I had no right to ask. I thought I could make an answer out of fear. I was wrong." The silence that followed was heavy. "You don't get to test people like they're experiments," Eleanor said, her voice low and firm. "Not your family, not your hands that were supposed to hold us." Julian offered apology without symbols. He said the names of those he had wronged, the caretaker, the gardener, the neighbors. He promised to make restitution. He stepped down from his role as CEO, realizing he needed fewer platforms to perform ethics. He enrolled in counseling and began the slow, tedious work of being changed. He returned to the clinic daily, not as a judge, but as a volunteer. He swept floors, made tea, and fixed a leaky sink. He made himself useful where it mattered. Clara watched the change as a process. She tested him with small tasks: check inventory, sit with a grieving relative, listen without self-justification. Not everyone forgave him. Marcus avoided him for months. The caretaker's trust was fractured and healed slowly. But Julian didn't hide. He apologized again and again. He funded a legal fund for workers and an emergency line for the clinic, ensuring the money was targeted at specific harms, not just goodwill. Months later, Julian and Clara sat on the clinic porch. Rain began to wash the city's dust away. Julian reached into his pocket and took out a simple ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not as a rescue plan. Will you marry me if I keep doing this work? If I keep choosing to be honest and stop testing people with fear?" Clara looked at the ring and then at him. She had weighed the ledger and found it leaning toward truth. "Yes," she said, "if you keep the promise about the work." They married in the clinic courtyard. No press, no velvet ropes. Silas, Teresa, Idris, and Musa were there, alongside the neighbors Julian had once terrified.
The vows were plain, promises to be honest, to repair, and to accept consequences. They didn't promise perfection, they promised labor. Years later, Julian no longer counted names or proofs. He learned that the only honest ledger is kept by time and patience. He and Clara built a home near the clinic. He painted, he mended, and he found joy in small economies.
He never again asked a life to be evidence for a conclusion he wanted to prove. Julian Stone had hired a fake debt collector to threaten his family, and in doing so, he broke a trust he didn't own. But in the ruins of that experiment, he found a truth he couldn't buy. The question was never about who would stay without his name. It was about whether he could stay for someone when they asked him to be real. If this story of broken trust and the long road to redemption touched you, remember that character isn't built in a boardroom, but in the quiet choices we make every day. Subscribe to Real Compass for more stories that explore the hidden depths of human nature and the power of second chances. Click the like button if you believe that true wealth is measured by the people who stand by you when the lights go out. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had your trust tested, or have you been the one doing the testing? How did it change you? Thank you for watching, and remember, the truest map to a person's heart is found in the small mercies they show when they think no one is watching. We'll see you in the next story.